Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Middle Path Podcast. This is Mike Escott, and
Luke McLean.
the Middle Path is two men living very different lives, thousands of miles apart, but we're sharing our insights and experiences on life, spirituality, and wellness. The Middle Path is a bridge between traditional teachings and modern life. This project is about helping and supporting men to find their middle path.
The middle path includes talks, interviews, meditations, challenges, and pretty much anything else we can think of.
So here we go, guys.
Well, it's our first episode of what we're going to call the middle path, mate, which I'm super excited about.
Same, man. Same. Definitely, dude. Thanks. This is going to be great. It's going to be good.
So I thought today was a good chance to really just talk about what the middle path is, what the purpose of the podcast has been based on our discussions, mate, and to really sort of introduce ourselves and introduce, what this is all going to be about. So if that's cool, I reckon we'll sort of kick it off and, a bit of background into the middle path. Michael, what's that mean to you?
What it means to me, that's a good one, because that keeps changing, throughout time and throughout this experience, or my experience, or any experience for that matter. Middle path was introduced to me when I started really getting into the spiritual side of my life, or my journey, through Buddhism, through meditation practices that were mainly from the Buddhist traditions or Buddhist practices, about meeting in the middle. It's about finding the balance between both extremes. And for me, it's finding that every single day, that knowing that if you go one way, can be, in excess, it could be too much for you, and everything will fall apart, because something won't get what it needs. And if you go too light on something else where you are depriving yourself, it's the same concept. It's not even about anything from like overeating to overindulging, or undereating, or underindulging, and finding that way to glide all the way through. The best understanding that I had being a musician, or coming from a musician, is I remember there was a teaching from the Buddha where he described a guitar string that is perfectly wound or perfectly taut. If it's too loose, it's going to flop around and make no sound. If it's too tight, it'll break. So when you find that tuning and you go to that specific note where it's balanced, it's not too tight, it's not too loose, you will find that harmony, you will find that note. And then from there, you can play with anything. That's what resonated with me. And that's where I found that not only the concept of that, but trying to make that work in life. And it went from everything from the physical practice, from a yoga background, of finding the balance, because it is exactly that. It's not pushing, but it's not pulling. It's a combination of both. Both need to exist in order for you to find that balance. And a beautiful thing that I found in the end, without getting too deep into it, just kicking it right off, is that's where the balance is. If you let go at the same time, something will push you in the direction that you need to go, and you will be able to find that clarity. That's the hope, anyway.
Yeah,
that's the hope.
I mate, that's like the guitar string, and I've heard that with the piano too. Like it's like that that tuning, and when you connect that to other sort of spiritual teachings around that vibration of vibrating at a certain level that is your vibrational level, like not trying to be someone else's and too high or too low, but finding, and as you know, with music, finding your flow, and that's going to be, everyone's middle path will be different.
Totally.
So
totally.
Yeah, that's a cool bit. And the tradition was, and if I'm not wrong, it was based in the Buddha. He grew up in a temple as basically a king's son, had everything he could have wanted, realized that he saw suffering and then wanted to find that path. He went and suffered inherently with teachers, and thought that might bring him enlightenment, and realized it didn't. But what he found was abundance. Too much wasn't bringing him happiness. Nothing, and suffering wasn't bringing him happiness. And it was the middle way. It was the middle path for him that he found was the right way for everyone. So that's sort of the tradition. But even today, I feel, mate, that it's so relevant to find that middle path for everyone.
It really is, especially now. Regardless of if we were talking mid-pandemic, pre-pandemic, or maybe hopefully when it ends post-pandemic. It's finding that path for everybody is going to be different for sure, but knowing that there's a difference between the two. And you're right, the tradition of that with Siddhartha Gautama, which was the Buddha's given name. He was a king's son, and he was sheltered and kept away, almost like an ignorance is bliss, from seeing the realities of life. And Buddha found that the reality of life is suffering. And there is a constant guide, or drive, I should say, not guide, but drive for us to alleviate that suffering. But in doing so, he found that if he suffered so much, that wasn't the way of the enlightenment. It was knowing that the suffering needed to be there, acknowledged it, but also learned from it and moved on and gave up in a lot of ways. Now, I don't mean giving up as in like quitting, surrendering to it and knowing that it is there, and that's kind of brings it full circle to how you and I met, how you and I are talking, and what we're trying to do with this podcast and these conversations is knowing that there's a surrendering of whatever's pulling us or pushing us, is finding that point of recognition that both sides need to exist at the same time in order for it to be a thing. The light and the dark need to come in the middle, because you won't know what darkness is until you see light. You won't know what light is until you see darkness. So it's a beautiful concept. It's even more fun to be able to put that into practice and see if it actually does exist. And I've found it does, not just in a spiritual teaching, but in everything that I've done, in any kind of action, any kind of thing in life. If you can find that middle ground or find that way of flow, almost, it's a beautiful thing.
So we've jumped straight in the deep end.
Yeah, we did. Kind of hard not to. So we could roll it back.
So we'll roll it back and we'll go. So we called the podcast The Middle Path.
Yep.
The reason behind that is, again, when you're using that as the central teaching, is to try to find, spiritual and wellness conversations and realizations for people who maybe aren't going to go to the depths of Buddhism and spirituality that maybe we have, or even other people, but to want to meet, especially men and anyone in the middle, and find a story, find an analogy, find a way for them to be able to take some of those teachings and explore some of those conversations in today's life in what they currently know. So, not trying to put it above them or below them, but find a middle path for them.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, exactly. And that is the beautiful thing of the middle path. Like, we jumped into the deep end because, well, that's where you and I have gone, you know what I mean? In our own ways. That's definitely where I have gone, because that's where my brain likes to go. It likes to get into the nitty gritty. It likes to dissect and take apart, but at the same time, finding that middle path for me was to be able to look at something, for just what it is. What is a sunset? Well, mathematically speaking, it's this, and this, the distance from the sun, the way the curvature of the earth, and you go through all those kind of things in a universal aspect or a cosmic aspect or whatever. But when you take it back, it could be just like, well, a sunset is beautiful. That's what it is. That's the point, and we don't need to have these deep teachings, but we do, but some of it can turn a lot of people off. How do you find it in a practical way, in a modern, aspect or modern life, of how to find that analogy of those ancient teachings or even newer teachings of, getting above and beyond to just be as simple as it is. It just is. There's an isness to it all. And I that's what's exciting me the most about it, is to get out of your head, just feel it, feel it. That's the same thing with, again, the middle path and come back around. So.
And it's like, what's the point? Like, I had this realization of, what's the point of having all this information, reading all these books, listening to all this stuff, if I've got no way to talk to it in a way that people get, that I want to teach and coach and work with. Like, if I've got it at this level, like high, then I only get it. And, you might get it when we talk, but there's only this portion of people that understand it and no one else does.
Yeah.
At an egoic level, that might make me feel good. But if my purpose is wanting to share it with more people at a middle level that are introducing it to it, then the higher knowledge is useless.
Right. Beyond useless. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to work, and this is why the podcast is exciting, to try to bring some of those teachings down and really talk to them in real life scenarios, real life ways. And we'll talk about this in coming episodes.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think to add to that too, it's not even about bringing it down. It's look at it in a lateral sense. It's on a different plane. We're almost speaking in a different language. So we have to figure out, again, the middle path of what does everyone understand? What do we all understand? And I can learn, from the simplest teachings to the most, intricate teachings. And that's where it is, and sometimes when you simplify something, it makes it even harder. So why not, that's a beautiful thing about this too. So.
It's almost a reframe of it, isn't it? We're trying to reframe it into a way that, is palatable.
Yeah, exactly. Palatable for everybody.
Yeah. So, mate, let's talk about. Okay, we'll start with you. Let's talk about your journey. Into the middle path. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on now, and then we'll flip the roles.
Okay, cool. So background is what we're doing here on this. Without the long-winded speeches, and I'm sure we'll get into this, that's the other fun thing about doing multiple podcasts of this, is that we'll get into every little detail. My path started even when I was younger, even when I was a child, just always looking for that other thing. I questioned everything, which is a gift and a curse in a lot of ways. But I also accepted a lot of things too, whether or not that acceptance was a truth or something that I wanted to believe or needed to, or even whether it be, a rule, set down by society or whatever it was. But that questioning and that acceptance at the same time, or looking for acceptance, not only for myself, but also from others. I got heavily involved in the punk rock and hardcore scenes and the music scenes, being a musician or just even a fan of music or just loving music. But that took me into so many other, almost counterculture type roles too, because there is always a rebellious nature to that too, whether it be from skateboarding or whatever it was. But at the same time, I also had a really good athletic background. I played a lot of baseball. I was very, movement was a big thing for me. But it was, trying to make those connections and have all those things happen all at the same time and make it work. Whereas if, I couldn't skateboard every night if I was still, playing baseball and doing all my, long practices for baseball. Same thing with my band. Like I couldn't play and go on tour with my band when I was in high school because I was involved in sports. So it was that conflict of doing both of those and then giving up on one and diving into the other and doing whatever else. But for me, that journey of finding that counterculture, especially with the music, was what opened my eyes to all the different perspectives and possibilities that life had to offer, whether it be from meeting different people with different ideas or different cultures, different backgrounds, and especially from touring. It really opened my eyes to my story is not the only story, but at the same time seeing the parallels that my story, even though I came from upstate New York, in whatever, culture that existed there, but I could go to someplace in Europe or Japan or, Australia or whatever else. And also somebody who grew up on the other side of the planet might have had the same kind of journey. The details were different, but we had the same drive that I spoke of earlier to try to get us to that point. Fast forward a few years into that, from being in the music scene and being in a rebellious nature, there was a lot of partying going on in those touring days. And it was part of the culture. It was part of the lifestyle. And I went through some dark times and even got into, abuse of alcohol mainly. I never really did anything else other than drink a lot, but it was everywhere. And, everything was everywhere. And when I went through some major changes in my life, that was one of the pinnacles of what led me to this journey that I'm on now. And even though it was an idea when I was a child, it really became predominant in my life moving forward to find the spirituality or even just find a middle path, even if we're not talking about spirituality or like those extremes of going in the deep end of just like, what makes me feel better? why do I feel like shit on certain days and why other days I don't feel like shit. So through that darkness and through that, like the dark night of the soul type of thing, I ended up getting sober. I ended up, quitting drinking, and then that opened my path to this stuff, to these kind of talks and these kind of conversations and this kind of journey. And that opened the world for me to not only explore that for myself, but within others. I found sanghas, which is, community or groups of other people that were on a similar journey. I found my yoga practice, which is the physical aspect of yoga anyway, not just the mindset or the preparation for meditation or even just search or even, listening, deep listening, even if you want to, call meditation deep listening. That was what it was for me. So I'm very much on that journey still. And that's a very flash, like a big, just a quick little view of where my background is and kind of where it got me from here. It's not different from other people's stories, but it's mine. It's unique to me, which is great. And, that's another fun thing about all of this too. So that's kind of where I'm at with it now.
And that's awesome. And it's so, I think everyone's stories are so interesting. So, I think it's so good to talk to that and just to understand and give a bit of background from it. Yeah. So that's important. Cool.
Now, what about you?
Man, I think, similar, but not similar, which is interesting where, I reflect on this a bit now with a bit more insight, I think. And, when I was 5, it's funny, the kids play with the plate, but when I was 5, I won what's called the state BMX championship. So when I was just, 5 or 6, I've got a 6-year-old now, and I didn't realize how young that is. But I can remember the race, and I can remember my dad, going up to the starting line and my dad saying, just do your best. And I sort of told him that I'd win, and I won. But what that did is put me on a trajectory of really connecting or having a sense of self through sport or through winning. Mm-hmm. And for my whole life, that sort of guided me, especially through sports. So, I had a really good discipline. I was reasonably athletic, but I'd get good at a lot of sports. And as you know, with that, and most people do, that when you're the best player and the top 2 or 3 players in the team, there's acceptance and there's a sense of importance and where you sit. And I'd always search for teams that needed me. I always wanted to sort of be there. Occasionally I'd challenge myself and go up leagues where I wasn't the best player, but I was in the best league. So that was okay. But
I can relate to that.
So cool. There's a real feeling, and it was an unpack a few years ago that, there was this hero's journey for me to always be the hero. And that's sort of how I related to myself. And it was only recently, probably in the last decade, that there was a feeling that was all, as much as there was positives, and there is positives in that, the competitive nature and that want to compete because there's discipline and there is community and there's acceptance. It was all sort of entrapped in ego.
Yep.
This sense of self, because I'm good at this, or I won this, or I did this event. And it was all based on those foundations. And what happened if you got old, which we all will, and that gets taken away from you, who are you? Yeah. And that was sort of the realization, and what sort of took me down a more spiritual path and a more, middle path, is to realize who I am without those labels, who I am without those attachments.
Beautiful.
And then I guess the other part, mate, was growing up in a family that was an awesome family, but there was no expression really of love much.
Okay.
There was, 3 boys. It was wrestles. It was tough it up. It was suck it up. It was, sarcasm was a form of, connection. It wasn't, care. As you
I speak that fluently.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, again, the foreignness of to talk about self-love, about self-care, about, loving kindness is really for most, for many men in Australia, I don't know about in the States, but it's foreign and it's hard to do. And that's something that, again, I've had to try to practice and become more comfortable with in the last 5 to 10 years.
Cool. Yeah. To counter that, or to kind of bat that one back, that was always something that was to do too. More so on the fact of, or from the aspect of, that I had to hide that. um, my self-love or my self-care and that kind of intimacy or even showing of love, it's in my nature. I was always that kid. But I was also made fun of, beat up, bullied because I was that kid. Now, other kids that got bullied loved it because, okay, they felt the acceptance. And sometimes I would be that martyr that would take those beatings so the other kids wouldn't get beat. Even at times fell victim to that, where I had turned like ego. This is that's coming up. Like I had that ego around where I became a bully to make sure that I wasn't going to be bullied in a situation, and feeling that kind of remorse, feeling that kind of, or falling victim to that and being like, what am I doing? Like, even when I was a kid, I remember being like, why am I even bullying this other kid or making fun of them? That's not how I feel. It's like, it's the fault that I find in myself. So I'm going to point it at that kid so they look at his faults, not mine. And when you're talking about best, there respect of that too. When I was first started getting in sports, I wasn't the best, but out of nowhere, I became really good at some of the stuff I was doing. And then got on some of the bigger sports and then got moved up, like you said, to a different team or a different league where I wasn't the best. If anything, I was definitely the worst, the smallest or whatever, but that made me better. In a lot of different ways. It also humbled me. But at this time, it was like there was a different type of ego for me. It wasn't because I was the best. It's because I always knew that I wasn't. And even if I did come out on top, there was a weird guilt that I felt that was like, why am I being praised? I'm not the best. You know what I mean? Because I know myself deep down, I'm not really that good. And it comes from like what you were saying, those attachments to it and not being able to express that, intimacy to somebody else. Because admitting that you're not the best to somebody that's a death sentence in a lot of ways, especially in an all male, macho, machismo type culture. And yeah, it's very much like that in the States. You guys might have it a little bit more, I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Like I do see the similarities between the two. I definitely see the similarities. So.
Yeah. And I wasn't like at an ego level, I wasn't an outward ego. Like I'd never say how good I was at something. It was an inner ego. Like it was an inner sense of almost, if I didn't play well or if I didn't do that, there was almost a letting myself down. If I played well, I definitely wouldn't talk it up. It was more just this inner sense of self was based on that ego that was talking to me, which was really interesting, and, something that, only in the last few years, mate, that I've reflected on more and realized that guides me, that even now people will see like I'm still deeply competitive. And that's just been who I have been. And again, something we'll talk about in later episodes, but embracing that, building a better relationship to that, not trying to pretend it doesn't exist, because it does.
Right.
And that's like 40 years of conditioning, why it's existed. And I understand that and I'm cool with that, but it's the healthy relationship to that.
Yeah. No, I think even if we spun that back around to what is this whole podcast about, or why are we even talking? It's like, it's the healthy relationships to the things that are creating the suffering, or even the idea that it might even be a suffering. So yeah, it's about the healthy relationships.
So the podcast, mate, what if we're going to future look and look out there, what are you wanting to get from and give to the podcast?
Well, okay, I like this one. This is what I've been thinking about a lot since the first time you and I even chatted, like even connected for the first, like, what do I want to get out of this? But also, what do I want to give out of this? What I want to get out of it is be able to learn as much as I can. What is funny about that is that I'm starting to accept the fact to be teaching a lot of people without even meaning to. Most of my life has always been a paralysis by analysis type of person. I'm never going to be good enough because I'll never know all the answers. But even having that concept in a positive having a positive relationship to that concept of never knowing everything, that is enough to teach somebody else and be teachable. And that's really where it comes down to. I'm big on failure. I fail a lot, but that's because I try a lot. I'm also more afraid of success than I am of failure, because I've told myself that I've failed more than I've succeeded. but then there's a different relationship to that and a different concept of that. So what I'm looking to give to this podcast is an authenticity that I've never been able to really give before, because I've always heard feedback from other people, because obviously we're mirrors for each other in so many ways. We may not be able to, without getting deep again, we may not be able to see what we truly are to somebody else, because we have our own ego telling us, you're not that, you got to be better. Whereas everyone else may be looking at us going, that dude's rad, and what I want to get out of it is to be able to give that authenticity, to teach from it, being like, yo, I made this mistake. You don't have to, or you're going to go make this mistake too. Call me when you're done. So we can laugh about it. You know what I mean? Because that's a huge part of it too. It's like you talked about a hero's journey, like that's a huge part of it. We all do that. It's an archetype, like that, that story, that storyline or that concept is innate in human history and human nature. And we have to do it. You know what I mean? We just don't have to do it where it's detrimental to everybody's health. You can learn from somebody else's mistake, but you still need to know how it kind of feels in a lot of ways. And we're destined to that in a lot of ways. So like, I can't wait to share what I've been through, but also talk to other people and talk to you and learn like, whoa, that I never looked at it that way. Why have I never seen it that way? And thanks. And now that just makes, 20 years of my life feel awesome, where I thought it was shit before. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm excited about and what I'm looking to contribute to, but also get out of this thing. I can't wait to learn. That's really it.
Yeah. And mate, I love, because like when I first heard in the spiritual sense, like that we all suffer, like for me, that was a liberation of like, it's like, fuck, that's just not me. Like, it's just not me suffering. Like it was like everyone suffering.
Yeah.
In some way. And for some people I speak to about that, it's like that made them feel worse, but it actually made me feel a lot better to know that you've been through, thousands of people have been through, and thousands will go through again, or are going through now. And again, to share that and go, you know what, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're all doing it in some form. And if we can help to guide a little bit better, to reduce the mistakes, to reduce the suffering a little, or to support, as you said, people going through that, I think that's powerful.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and coming from the recovery side of things too, when I first got sober, I talked to a handful of people. I talked to I shouldn't even say a handful. It was a handful at first, but then it became everybody that I came in contact with through different 12-step organizations, everything from AA to some Buddhist-based practices, even group therapies, just all the different forms of that being out there, even from just connecting to somebody else, you do realize you do have a uniqueness, but it's not any more unique than anybody else's. Everybody's going through a similar situation. And to know you're not alone in this, which a lot of us think we are, or feel we are, because like all we know is what's in between our eyes, or in between our ears. It's like, it's ourselves. Like to know that somebody else is going through that too, or went through something similar, whether they came out on the other side or they're still going through it, there is a sense of just feeling okay about it. You know what I mean? Of getting like, oh, I'm not alone. That's huge. And that's the main point. It's that connection that we have, that empathy that we can share with everybody else. And I think that's huge. It's really important. And, I know that you and I are definitely going to get that across to a lot of people on this too. So,
and you mentioned before, like the word Sangha, and that idea of if we can build, a healthy community based on openness, on authenticity, on growth and humility, like that for me, something that I really want to get out of this is to, to talk to people, to have interaction by the listeners.
Yep.
It's just not going to be you and I talking. We're going to get interviews happening. We're going to run some free meditations, run some workshops, really trying to build this out to be more than just a once a week, 1 hour talk between you and I, but a chance to, interact and work with and to build this collectively with an audience.
Yes. Well, that's what we're really, what is the point of doing this? You know what I mean? What is the point of doing a lot of, anything along these lines, even for ourselves? If I came up with it's the same, like we'll go back even to Buddha. Or we'll go into Bruce Springsteen. Doesn't matter. There's a reason why they found whatever that truth was or whatever that story was, and you have to share it with somebody else. So like, let's not get spiritual in the aspect of like talking about Buddha or Jesus or anything else for any kind of religion or philosophy or whatever it was. Let's talk about Bruce Springsteen. Let's talk about the band Sick of It All from New York. Let's talk, they wrote a song and shared it with everybody else, and what that made them as musicians or just entities with, storytellers or whatever you want to call it, was the audience. It wasn't just the song they wrote, but how that song made somebody else feel, or how that made them or helped them remember, or even say, yo, Springsteen is going through it too. He's working class. You know what I mean? He knows my story. That's where the power lies. So, you and I could be talking in a vacuum. What good does it do? Yeah, we'll feel good at the end of the day, but really that's not what it's about. And that's the other fun thing about finding that middle path with ourselves, is that it is supposed to go out and be embraced by others, with others, for others. And we'll get just as much feedback back from them. It's like that one candle that you light can light 1,000 other candles, man. And that's what we're doing with this.
Mate, I love it. I'm excited by it because I'm excited, like the trepidation of episode 1 and sort of not knowing where it's going to go or where it could go. And already today we've gone into depths and discussed things. And I love that we can sort of ping ball off, spirituality to Bruce Springsteen to sort of talking about sports. And there's episodes in line around things like skateboarding and what the learnings you get from those, the simplicity, I think's really awesome, which I'm looking forward to.
Me too.
Audience wise, mate, like what's, people are going to listen to this for the first time. What are your insights? What are your bits of wisdom that you'd like to give them in terms of just sort of setting them up for the next episodes in terms of what to expect, and what they can sort of take from this?
Strap in, get ready to cry. Get ready to laugh, get ready to do whatever, and get ready to be confused or even upset. The beautiful thing about that is that the insight I can give you is just come with an open mind. Come with your experience. Come with your perspective, because that's what helps build. It's another piece of that. We'll build a foundation for you, and then everything else that we build upon that foundation, whether it be, if you want to take the analogy of a tree, it's like we're rooted down, now we're growing our branches. You're actually going to be a part of that branch, you know what I mean? Or it's the holiday season right now. It's like you're putting the ornaments on that branch of the tree that we're growing for you. It's like I can't give you too many. The only preparedness I can give you is to just be open to everything that's in front of you, because as we even found out with just this introduction, I had a totally different agenda of what we were going to talk about and how we were going to introduce ourselves and what we're going to do. And we're already going to so many different directions. So just get ready for a wild ride, but we'll find a way to bring it back to the basic teaching and whatever that is. And who knows what everybody's going to get out of it. You're going to get out of it what you bring to the table. But if you come with an open mind and come with an open heart in a lot of ways, who knows what you're really going to take away.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I'm like, if you can just, if it resonates with you and it feels right within you, then go with it. If it doesn't, then question it. And this isn't about believing everything. This is just about observing and really sitting with. And it's like I always say, it's like a suit. You can wear whatever part of it you want. You don't have to wear the whole suit. You can just wear the tie if the tie works. For sure. If the pants fit, then wear the pants. But you don't have to take every bit of information on and believe that that's all true. And that's one of the best teachings I like, is observe how it shows up in you. And is it right for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's another aspect to that too, is that we're all put together. Yes, if you want to talk a molecular level or whatever else, we're all built from the same DNA strands and this, whatever else, and whatever is coded into that, makes us a chair versus a human being. You know what I mean? It's all those kind of weird, like the way the molecules are arranged. And when you do look at that, yes, it is all carbon based and, hydrogen or oxygen or whatever, to put those molecules together to build whatever else it is. But it depends on the way that it's structured. So when you're looking at something like a teaching and only 10% of it resonates with you and the rest is all crap to you, that's totally fine, because that was the piece that you were either missing or everything else was already a given, and it's something you don't need to explore. Now, the observation aspect of that too is we could be blinded by what we think we already know. And conversations like this or putting on together the different parts of the suit might be like, yo, I never wear a tie, so today I might wear a tie. Awesome. Take a chance. You know what I mean? Or just, hey, dude, ties aren't for me. That's fine too. That's what's beautiful about all this stuff, is that it's good. It's all good.
Yeah. And for someone, that's getting introduced, mate, to the middle path today for the first time, like,
yeah,
when you first got introduced to it, like, what's the first bit of the middle path? Like, where do you start? Like, because I know that I started with, like, okay, what are my attachments? Like, what's the stuff that I'm desires and abundance that's causing me suffering? Like, what's this? Because I felt like that I was top heavy in that stuff, feeling like I wasn't. There wasn't a lot of stuff that I didn't have enough of that was causing me to suffer. It was mostly based in a huge amount of I needed this, I needed that to make me happy, and I needed to simplify and come back to find the middle path. But I'd be interested to see where you came up with.
Well, that's a good one. I haven't really thought about this in a while too. Even though to be honest with you, now it's kind of second nature. It's so much so that I almost forget about it, because it is like one of those givens. Everybody's going to be different when they find their balance, and knowing where to start is the hardest part. So let's relate that to the recovery or my sobriety. It's like, I didn't know what to fix first. I did not know where to begin, because everything was falling apart, or at least that's what it seemed like to me. So what I ended up doing was, after I tried a bunch of different things that didn't work, I started with, let's just not drink for a day. Let's just not do that for a day and see where it goes from there. And it was scary and it was hard, and it still is in a lot of ways, but it's finding where to start. We don't know where the beginning is. And for me, to find that middle path was to just start trying as many different aspects as possible. So for me, it was the meditation, the admitting or even asking for help, not just admitting I had a problem, but also asking for help. That's huge. And that can relate to anything. I don't know how to find another job. I don't know how to tell my loved one that they piss me off, or that I need to break up, or that I want to be with this other person. You know what I mean? Like, I have this desire and I want to have a relationship with them. You don't know where to begin with that kind of stuff. And a lot of it comes from asking for help or asking for that. So that's kind of where I started. And then where it went to, even if I wanted to go into the physical athletic, or even for me, the yoga practice, the physical practice of yoga, was finding my balance. It's like standing on one foot. Well, how do I know how to do that? Like, I don't have balance. Well, you don't right now. So just keep trying and see where it's going to work. And eventually you either ask questions. Am I doing this right? No, you're focusing too much on the foot. Focus on this or focus on that. You learn from other people. I know I'm getting away from the question that you asked, but like, for me, it was trying everything, having that open mind, understanding that, like, wherever my convictions, whatever they used to be, might have been misguided, or they might have been true, but having that observation to look at it and really just give it a try. What have you got to lose, type of thing. That was key for me. I think.
When you say that, mate, like, something resonates in me, which has guided me probably for the last 2 years. And it's just around being curious, starting with curiosity.
Yeah.
Almost that has been like, well, what would my middle path look like?
Yeah.
What do I want to get out of that relationship with that person? Let's just unpack that first and get really curious about that. And maybe that could be the starting spot for a lot of people, because I've always found that for me's help when I'm unsure, is just get really curious about about what you're unsure about.
Especially what you're unsure about.
Yeah. But because the curiosity, for me, it opens up expansion and possibility without the ego.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, Wow, that could take us into a couple of different spins on that, which I love. And then, I should be keeping notes on this one too, as to all the other topics we can, get out of this. But like without ego, ego is there to protect us in a lot of ways too. You know what I mean? But it can be our biggest enemy. And, the protection will limit us from trying to maybe go that other step. But that's what it's there for. It's almost it's the, like we were talking about before, or, the push and the pull. The whole point of the middle path too is to not let the ego control you. It helps ground you and keep you grounded into, I don't want to use the word reality, but that sense of where it needs to be. Otherwise we would have the huge head, you know what I mean? But then again, it can inflate and deflate the opposite ways. So it's like, it is a complicated conversation or concept or an even topic to get into. But the beautiful thing about it is that curiosity, even if it's a question of not like, of getting down on yourself or having that negative speak about it, because that's what ego does a lot of the times too.
For sure.
I might be getting a little bit too vague on this too, but again, I don't want to get into too deep of a topic that could be a whole other 2-hour long conversation. But that the reason why I'm speaking to that, or why it's resonating with me, is that was my biggest problem. Like I mentioned before, it's like, I knew early on that I will never know everything. I'll never be the smartest person in the room. Even if I am, there's another room I'll walk into and somebody else is smarter, quote unquote, than me. But, I'll never know all the answers. But instead of looking at that like, oh, fuck, that's terrible, man, I'll never know all the answers. Now I'm looking at it going, dude, that means I can keep learning. It's always going to be something new as long as I let it be something new.
And what does having all the answers give you?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Nothing. Nothing. It really doesn't give you anything, unless you're able to turn it into something of like teaching somebody else. But even then, it's like, there is no end road. That's the other fun thing about the middle path. It's not a beginning or an end. That's the same thing with like strong or light or dark and light, or whatever you want to look at it that way. It's like, it never ends. It's a constant moment, the ever changing present moment. So.
Yeah, because if you had everything, if you had all the answers and you knew what was going to happen, life would be pretty boring.
It's totally boring. Yeah.
And that's
I think
that's the bit I love about the middle path. It's like, it's if that's going one way of it, if you had everything, knew everything, you're at one side of it, that's no good. And if you've got nothing and you know nothing, that's also no good. So let's find the middle ground. What we can do with the path is make it bigger and longer.
Yeah.
And expand its capacity, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, I think that's actually the true enlightenment, is that you find that middle path isn't a pinhole. It's not a laser point. It widens and widens and widens until it encompasses everything. And then you realize where that balance is. And you realize that is the ascension to whatever enlightenment could be. And enlightenment doesn't always mean like, angels singing in the background and you're floating above and here I am knowing all again. No, it's actually just being in the moment going, that sunset is beautiful. Yeah. That's pretty rad. I can't wait to see it tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good, man. Before we finish episode 1, you got anything else? Because I know that I've hijacked the whole agenda. So have you got anything that you want to
what's funny is that like, I don't think you hijacked anything. I think you definitely, you're helping to steer the ship, because I am, I can definitely float around and go from side to side, or looking for every kind of port, however analogy I want to go with that one. But it's like, I have nothing else to add, because you and I definitely have the same vision on this. So any direction we could have gone in is perfect. I'm just happy that we're doing it, stoked that we're doing it, and can't wait to see where this takes us next. So,
all right. Before we go, what are you reading at the moment, and what are you listening to at the moment?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Okay, so I'm kind of flipping around a little bit. Reading right now is actually, I'm going to have to grab it because it just came in yesterday. From Wisdom Publications.
That's a big book.
It's huge. Well, this is what I'm jumping into. This is The Science and Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist Classics, Volume 1, the physical world, and it's written, conceived and introduced by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So this is a fun one. That one, and I'm also reading Heir to the Jedi, which is a Star Wars novel, because I have to have my Star Wars in my life.
I can't wait to talk more about you, because we haven't never discussed your Star Wars addiction. And I'm looking
addiction is, yep, that's exactly it, dude. It's exactly what it is.
I'm looking forward to that. Could be an episode on your addiction to Star Wars and why.
Not only my addiction, but the Dharma of Star Wars. That's another great book that everyone I should read, especially if they have any interest in finding the Dharma, but they also have a love for the movie and the I don't even want to call it movies, the lifestyle that is Star Wars. So yeah, it'll definitely be a long episode, and I'm okay with that too. So
that's good. That's good. And listening to music was, man.
Music, go with reading, and then we'll get on to music.
I've just read. I'm reading, going back to the Tao of Ordinariness by Robert Wicks. So I've got it out there. I haven't got it with me, but it just talks about. I love this idea, and I've read it once, but I'm going back over it, and it's just talking about the idea of if we can find our ordinary selves, and if we can stop trying to be someone that we're not, and trying to, remove all that. Once we put ourselves almost in a container, then we become almost limitless, and we stop pinballing around, but we find our true self, and then within that, we find everything. And it's based on some real simple principles around humility, around simplicity, around self-respect, and looks at that. So it's a really cool book, and I'll talk more on it, but I love the philosophy, because I think people get dragged around trying to be someone that they're not, and that takes a lot of energy.
It definitely does take, and I relate to that too. So now that's going to be another book that I'm actually putting in my phone right now as we talk. So I'm going to look that up, and we'll definitely have to rap about that one too. So
what we might even do at some stage is like read a book, collect together, and then we can review it as one. Like we'll get one.
I definitely think that's a good idea. I know for a fact I always get hit up by people, not only long time friends, but also like random people from, social media and whatever else, that always ask, what are you reading and what do you think? Or have you read this and what do you do? Where would you take this if you read it, and what's your, perspective on it? So I think that's definitely something we should do. A lot of people are going to want to know about that.
For sure. So, and listening to, mate, music wise, because I know it's a big part
Okay. It is. It's hard for me to find new, quote unquote, new music that I like. It's usually by bands that I've been following for a long time if they come out with something new. But I always, my music taste is definitely diverse, but I always go back to my old classics. There was an album that came out from Red City Radio, the band Red City Radio. They just put out another EP. Well, technically it's an EP because it's only like 4 or 5 songs. That came out. I think it's called 100,000 Candles. That's a fantastic album. Really cool mix, if you ask me, of old school roots, like a good rock and roll, like punk rock, like bass. But if you were to take Hot Water Music, Weezer, and the Foo Fighters and kind of put them all together with almost the southern like a cappella like ability to hit harmonies, that encapsulates that album for me. That's what it makes me think about it. That's pretty good. I'm still always listening to hip hop. Tribe Called Quest has been on my my mix for forever, and KRS-One are always my go-tos for that. And I'm leaving a bunch of other stuff out, but that's what's been in my ears, so to speak, in the last month or so.
Nice, man.
So
nice.
All right. What about you?
For me, always gets a really good run is a guy from Australia called Ziggy Alberts. So he's
okay. Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah, so he's folk, more folk, and just like his style. It was funny. He had a post on Instagram yesterday where he went away with his girlfriend for a week and read a bit of Pema Schroeder, and then got a little bit enlightened. I think it might have blown his mind a little bit. So nice to see that him at 26 sort of reading a bit of Pema, which we might discuss later if people don't know who she is. But one of the
yes, we definitely will. She has definitely been a big influence in my thinking, life, and feeling, and yeah, for sure. So we'll definitely have to touch on her.
So loving that, and Also, yeah, hip hop. I'm a big hip hop fan, and I got my son Cooper, who's 13, and sort of introducing him a little bit at the moment to J5. So
Jurassic 5,
yeah,
let's do this.
yeah. So a little bit of quality control and trying to get him to understand what good hip hop and old school hip hop's like. So dude, I can feel that from my stomach all the way through my head. That's another one of my favorite hip hop bands. I actually was on a Vans Warped Tour that they were on back in, 2000 something, early 2000s. Oh man, getting to see them live every day was just that was phenomenal. They're fantastic bunch of dudes, and I'm glad there. All right, cool. Again, we meet in the middle on something else that's phenomenal. That's great. So awesome. All right, mate, we'll wrap this one up.